Ravel was a brilliant orchestrator, and he knew the orchestra maybe as very few composers of the last century. However, to me, piano version, so to say, an original score of Mussorgsky is much superior. Piano, when properly handled, has all colors of the orchestra, and it is one of the cases where less is more. So I think that it's more powerful work on piano when it's played well. And it's one of the ultimate masterpieces of 19th century. I think, to me, it's the best solo work written by any Russian composer which has ever been written. It's an absolute masterpiece. Schubert was a genius. Schubert, oh my God, yeah, Schubert, yeah. Mussorgsky was a genius, clearly. He wrote it down in 3 weeks. It was very fastly done. It's profoundly original work. You have no examples before or after. It has no predecessors. He just, out of thin air, created new musical form, which is quite a challenge. Very few people, very few composers ever accomplished that. He never had actual musical training like people do nowadays. He was an amateur by his upbringing, but man of unbelievable creative genius. And that genius, I think, is very tangible and very audible in pictures at an exhibition. I love the work. I played it hundreds of times and never bored with it. Mussorgsky was not the greatest orchestrator. So when Rimsky-Korsakov, who was his younger friend and colleagues and the youngest member of the Mighty Five, so he cleaned up and touched up his scores, and mostly he did excellent job because Rimsky-Korsakov was also one of the best orchestrators of that time. Later, Shostakovich, who Mussorgsky influenced very profoundly, it was actually two major influences on him. It was Mussorgsky and Mahler. Say nothing about Mozart, but that's more subtle. He orchestrated his song cycles and some scene from Boris Godunov also. However, now, very recently, a couple of months ago, Valery Gergiev and the Metropolitan Orchestra played all Mussorgsky program, and the opener was A Night on a Bald Mountain in original orchestration of Mussorgsky. It's twice longer piece than what we know and what I conducted in orchestration of Rimsky-Korsakov, but it's very haunting and very bizarre work. And possibly, in spite of certain imperfection and strangeness and oddness of that score, it works very, very powerful. So it's good for Mussorgsky, I think, that Rimsky touched up certain things and put new orchestration and clean up the scores, because without it, possibly neither Boris, neither Havanchina would be that popular in opera repertoire. But original scoring of Mussorgsky also has its own advantages and extremely powerful, if somewhat awkward. When you're born into the culture, which I was born in Russia, and you brought up on, you know, Tchaikovsky, Mussorgsky, Rachmaninoff, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, Dostoevsky, Pushkin, Tolstoy, you know, Nabokov, Mandelstam, Pasternak, it's incredibly rich culture, incredibly rich country in talent, in creativity, in art. So you have very special feelings, like I'm sure French people would have a special feeling for French culture or whatever, or Americans for American culture. So that is part of the soil, it's part of your texture, part of your code when you're born there. And in spite of many, many wrong things about Soviet Union, and I'm not the greatest fan of that system, as you can imagine, I felt I feel still that it was tremendous luck for me. It's a destiny, of course, that I was born there and was exposed to that very intense cultural climate and great teachers which took care of me and taught me many, many things. So Russian culture to me is one of the greatest still, especially in literature and poetry and music. If you look at 20th century music, I think you don't have to be rocket scientist to realize that Stravinsky, Prokofiev, and Shostakovich possibly are arguably three or one of the five greatest composers of the 20th century. And they all are Russians. Stravinsky, of course, lived most of his life on the West, but it doesn't matter. So when you look at literature, you have Nabokov, who was later bilingual, trilingual. Even you have Boris Pasternak, you have Kandinsky, Malevich, Marc Chagall, and whatever. So it's a very, very powerful culture of the 20th century, and hopefully it will not die out and become too commercial and too market-oriented nowadays, because all of these good changes in Russia, but the downside of it is that now there is no pressure in ideology, it's just pressure to sell. And it might be something not very auspicious for the arts.
And younger Russians are becoming more and more westernized, I would imagine.
They become westernized, they go to very good schools all over the world, but the thing of it is that now, when 10 years ago most young people were trying to get out of Russia and find something in Western Europe or here in the United States, now it's not the case, because economy is so good and so booming that they go to Harvard, school, or to Stern, or to some London School of Economics, and then they go back to Russia because they can make much more money in Russia than here. Nobody knows how long it will last, but at the moment, economically, they are doing incredibly well. Ideas and opinions are kind of good when you analyze something, you grow up and you try things. But then, so mental perception of the world, mental perception, logical perception of music is perfectly legitimate, but it's on a very intermediate level. Then after that, certain things starts up which has nothing to do with you thinking about it or what idea, what Beethoven meant to say. I think it's very childish approach, actually. Because art, great art and great music stands on its own, and it has its own language. And when you try to translate language of music in some other languages, I think it's a dead end. Because if music doesn't speak on its own, whatever you can say about it will not help you much. And I think music also, real music, starts somewhere where words and mentation doesn't reach there. It's a different level, different faculty of human consciousness. So in that respect, I have absolutely no ideas, no messages, no ideology. It just whatever speaks to me comes through this one and comes out in a form of sound. But it's not conceptual art, and I'm not trying to convey any message to anybody. Music could convey different things to different people. You will have 300 people, and Schnittke Quintet, which is not an easy piece, will work with them absolutely in different ways. So it's all in the eye of the beholder. But that said, it has nothing to do with music itself. You have an apple, and you have 300 people looking at this apple and say, well, the apple is green, and so it will be 300 different pictures. What Stravinsky meant is that music speaks on its own, and any art speaks on its own. And if it doesn't, it means that it is an inferior art. If you have to explain you know, Fifth Symphony of Beethoven or something, what it really meant and why he was written and what was idea behind it. No matter how fascinating it might be for some people, it really doesn't matter. To me, it's totally irrelevant.